Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome to On Texas Football, and welcome back to our Underdog Fantasy Football Show. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers, joined by my good friend and a fantasy football expert, my man Matt Butler. Matt, how you doing, man? First of all, I got to give you some props. You were very thorough in your breakdown on the winning drive yesterday about Xavier Worthy and his coming out party and how you needed to invest in him if you were playing daily fantasy. And I did, and I got to tell you, I hit a couple of higher lowers with my man Xavier Worthy last night, and I'll give you props for that.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's sort of like why I like all the offerings they have because, some of these players like Worthy, he's a playmaker. He's going to make an impact, but you don't know exactly if it's going to be rushing or receiving. So, like when they offer fantasy points, it sort of encapsulates it all. So you don't have to sort of get sucked into the micro because you would have been lower on his receptions. It's not like he had a bad game. You wanted him, but when you get fantasy, it all encompassing and adds it all up together. So there's especially players with the multi, skill set like he does. It's one that fits well with the team. And I'm just happy. I felt rude. I didn't say hello to Mr. Shipley because he's a Longhorn legend with his family. At least I didn't make a fool of myself with my advice, though.
Oh no, Coach knows all about it, man. So no, we appreciate it. Everybody appreciates it. Matter of fact, we'll start with a few of those higher lowers. As a matter of fact, at the college level, Texas has the biggest game in college football this weekend. So we'll start there with some of the Longhorns and some of the Michigan players in the higher lowers, and then of course the NFL weekend kicking off. We'll get to that because that is really going to be the main meat of our fantasy football show, is talking about the NFL and how we can get you guys some of those great plays in daily fantasy. But first, let's thank our good friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Get in the game, ladies and gentlemen. Football season is here, and Underdog Fantasy is the best place to play fantasy sports. How does it work? Well, it's simple and easy. As a matter of fact, that's how we break it down here really for you. Really easy. You download the app, which I did. My man Matt has the app as well. Download the Underdog app or go online and takes almost no time. It's really easy. You can play their pick'em game. I can make my picks and submit them. Takes 60 to 90 seconds if you got no time and you want to be quick, or you can go down a rabbit hole, do all your research like my man Matt does here, make up to 8 picks in a single entry to win up to 325 times your money. Underdog adds a ton of excitement to the sports viewing experience, especially for football, which is why I personally love it, and you will too. And the best part is you can watch your progress update in real time, and they're going to offer you a hell of a deal. Today, Underdog is hooking us up and hooking all you up for the start of football season. Go to underdogfantasy.com. Use the promo code ONTexas for a first deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Plus you get that hookup right there, and just got to use the code ONTexas. You use that code, and they'll give you a first deposit offer up to $1,000, and they're going to give you a free pick as well. You get a plus a free pick along with that bonus cash you're going to get from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. All you got to do is use the promo code ONTexas. That's Underdog Fantasy, our choice and the choice for daily fantasy. All right, Matt, let's get right to it. Let's start with with college football. Big game for the Longhorns. I'm a big fan of the higher lowers. If you want to dabble, obviously you want to dabble in Underdog and you want to dabble in some daily fantasy, higher lowers are the best way to do it. They're simple. They're so easy. They give you a number, touchdowns, receptions, receiving yards, and you just got to be able to decide whether they're going to go lower or higher than that number, and that's pretty much how it works with the higher and the lowers. So you got your eyes on a couple of higher lowers here for the Longhorns in this matchup versus Michigan. What you thinking?
Well, I really like Jaden Blue's receiving yards going higher. Now, you need to hop on this because these lines are moving. So the higher lower right now is at 19.5. It was down around 18.5 earlier in the day, so it may go up. I'd like to get that on his receiving yards because we know how good of a receiver he is. You know how screen game's so big. We already talked about on our show, Longhorn Blitz. You're going to see a lot of Michigan trying to get them to go sideways, and you don't want to go straight at him. And a guy like Blue, his skill set, we've seen it since Bijan. We saw it with Jay Brooks, but being able to get them on the perimeter, catching the ball, I think that's a really good number. I mean, honestly, he can get it in one reception. He only needs 2, and he'll be there. The other ones are probably going to be on the lower end for Michigan. Now, these also are moving a lot. You know, just yesterday, Davis Warren was at 152.5 was his hot lower. I was liking that a ton. It's down to 146.5, which is starting to get in dangerous territory. Not grading out if you look at just the analytics. It's about a 50-50 bet. Yesterday, when it was at 152.5, it was probably a 60-40 around there in the favor. So still on the good side to go lower with him. And, in those, when you start to do these flex plays, when you add 3 players in there, if you want to try to make them correlate, in certain scenarios where you can. So finding a pass catcher or somebody like that along those lines, those are good lowers to take too, because if you think a quarterback's going to be lower, his pass catchers may be lower in addition to that. Now, Samaj Morgan was at 31.5. It's down to around 26.5. That's one about a coin flip also. Same with Tyler Morris, who was around 25.5. It's going down to 22.5. So just showing that these lines keep going in the favor of Texas on the football field. But if you're trying to make money, it's going to be tougher. So you might want to hop on them as fast as you can before they continue in that direction. Also, one other one that I really like that looks like it's sticking around is Edwards lower overall on his rushing yards. He was at 52.5. That was yesterday, down to 51.5. But, if you look at his metrics, he went from being one of the most explosive backs in all of college football in 2022. He was well over 7 yards per carry. His yards after contact were great. They were up in the 3s. Last 2 seasons, though, last year was down to like 2.38 yards after contact. Week 1 against Fresno State was down in the 1s. He had no missed tackles forced. His yards per rush have been down to like 3.4, 2.8. So you've seen since he had his leg injury, it's not been good for Edwards.
If we're looking at the lowers on some of the rushing totals you're talking about with some of the running backs, does that mean the assumption is that Texas will stifle their run game and that maybe Davis, Warren, Colston, Loveland, maybe some of the hires for them, maybe hidden because maybe Michigan throws the ball a little bit more than we thought? I was looking at that a little bit. Is that something you kind of look at in correlation? If you're going to, like you said, tell the story. The story is Texas is going to shut down the running game. If they do, Michigan will have no choice but to look elsewhere to move the football.
Yeah, Loveland, he's been so good over his career and this season.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily want to go with Davis Warren overall because I don't like the passing game overall, but Loveland being focused, and if he gets that high target share, like he was up around 40% of the targets before, he could easily take a higher while Davis Warren still not have an impressive game because he gets so much of that target share. That's a good one. And in addition to that, just the overall Mullings aspect impacting Edwards, I think, is going to be key. I've seen some numbers on Edwards receiving, but even his receiving has went down in recent years too. So, yeah, if we were talking on the higher end of things, a guy like Loveland, he's one that I would bet on being the one that could sort of have the potency and have high amount of their yards and targets in the passing game.
Yeah, I love the Jaden Blue higher lower, though. I'm with you. That seems to me that's the one I circled too, receiving yards. I was like, man, he had 6 targets in that game versus Colorado State. 6 targets. Matter of fact, I want to say he got one of the first targets of the game. Did he not?
Oh, he's been focused. I mean, you remember back to taking on taking on Washington and coming out and getting the ball in Blue's hands on the outside, even when Texas came from behind. Like the only thing, and I don't even think it's a worry, is like in the past he's fumbled, so maybe he doesn't get on the field. But I'm not letting something like that impact me. Like you said, he's getting the targets. His efficiency is there in the numbers. So Blue's a great one. If you're a person that does multiple tickets, I wouldn't be afraid of putting Blues higher on receiving yards on all the tickets.
Yeah, the only other Blue higher lower that's intriguing to me is the longest reception, because I know that screen game is going to be working. Sark's already talked about it. It's a perfect counter for a blitz-heavy team like Michigan with Dunn, Wink, Martindale. And I think he got, two 15-yard receptions, did he not? Versus Colorado State. Ooh, that was a little bit intriguing too. They got him at 11.5 as the higher low in the longest reception. That could happen. Swing screen could happen in really with obviously Sark with his very sophisticated screen game too. So something to watch there. I like that. That's good stuff there. I really do think that was a nice little nugget there, Matt. All right, let's jump to the NFL and talk about the NFL a little bit. Of course, we did have NFL action last summer, and Matt gave you some great information and some great knowledge about Xavier Worthy and why you should have went with those overall points for Xavier Worthy. Let's talk about the NFL. And and give me your thoughts. I mean, let's start with kind of the Cowboys and the Texans. A lot of folks are excited about the Cowboys and the Texans. We got a lot of Texans and Cowboys fans that are part of our own Texas football family. Maybe starting with the Cowboys and their matchup versus the Browns. Very rare to start off the season with one of those interconference matchups, but they'll be facing the Browns. What about this matchup lends itself to someone on either side, maybe for Dak especially, lends itself to potentially a fantasy breakout performance in this game, in this matchup?
Well, because this matchup, originally, when you look at it, you're going to be like, man, the Browns, tough defense. Dallas, if you look overall at DVOA and the projections for this season, this is a matchup of the two best defenses in football. It's Cleveland #1 and Dallas #2. We saw how good Cleveland was last year. They had a great pass rush, continue to. But there is one thing about Cleveland that they do a lot, and it isn't very good when you're facing against Dak, and that's just one high safety looks. Now, when you have the talent that they have in the pass rush, they've been able to get away with it in the past. But when you have that one high safety look, Dak last year, he was first in the NFL in EPA per play against single high safeties, and we're talking in also they play a ton of man. Him and CD just totally kill man coverage. In addition to that, with the cover one that they play and the one high safeties, Dak was first in success rate, first in EPA per play, tied for fifth in explosive play rate, and tied for fifth in first down rate. And in addition to that, the big zone that they play is cover 3 zone, and that's another one of the main coverages that Dak has most success against. So in this situation, Dallas is actually an underdog. Now, you aren't going to be expecting them to throw a lot too, but if you're in a close game or trying to come from behind late, you may see a little bit more of Dak. Then when you see that Dallas in the run game this year, I would say headed into one, it isn't nearly as strong as it's been in the past. The offensive line isn't as good as it's been in the past. You're going up not only against a good defensive front that has a great pass rush, but also the Browns have been solid against the run too. So you could funnel a lot of production, not only from game script being a dog on the road trying to go in, not only because of the coverage, but then just funneling from their ability at the line of scrimmage to win could cause Dak to have to drop back to pass even more. And he's a top 5 quarterback against the single high looks, and he's going to get a lot of single high looks. It was 67% of the time last year you had single high looks from the Browns. So it's a great spot. And you being the DB, I know that you can break down coverages all day long.
Yep, the single high. If you're going middle of the field closed, that's basically what they call a single high safety because they've closed the middle of the field. The middle of the field open means 2 high safeties because the middle of the field is literally open there. Against middle of the field closed, you brought up a little of these stats too with the single high safeties. Dak averages 8.45 yards per attempt. That is a top 5 number. 74% first read throw rate against middle of the field closed coverage. So
you know what that first read is? That's Lamb.
That's exactly right. That's who he's going to the first read. CeeDee Lamb had a 33% target share and was the first read on damn near 40% of attempts against middle of the field closed coverages. So to your point, Matt, and I'm just reiterating what you already broke down, CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott are money versus any team that plays a lot of single high middle of the field close. And the Browns top 5 in man coverage rate.
So another one.
Yeah, Dak will know what he's seeing. And yeah, him and CD have great chemistry. So I'm with you. That seems like a really solid pick. Don't necessarily know who's going to win the game, but the Cowboys can't run the football because they have I don't think they're going to be running the football because they have one of the weakest running back rooms in all the NFL. And last year, toward the second half of the season, their pass rate was through the roof. You're talking about upwards of a 60% pass rate the Cowboys had last season, late in the season or early down. So Cowboys want to throw the ball. And by the way, contract year for Dak. Contract years, guys show up. Big numbers.
Yeah, and look at CD against man last season, yards per route run, 4.44 yards per route run, which is insanely high. And we're talking Tyreek Hill didn't even break 4 last year for a season. You're talking about man coverage, and it's a perfect spot. And these are the spots where you can get, if you're going into the daily fantasy aspect of it in these drafts, they're going to be lower owned because of matchup. It's a tough defense. It's not projected to be high scoring. So these are the areas that you can magnify in and zoom in, and the scheme or the analysis in the situation can maybe tell you why one area can be very potent despite the whole game environment being sort of ugly or something that you're not really wanting to go against. But it's a great spot for those two players.
All right, let's jump to the Texans.
Yes.
I'm a Texans fan, and the Texans actually with a very interesting matchup against the Colts. Here's one thing I'll throw out there to start you off, because I know you got some more deep dive breakdown about this. But as a Texans fan, not just from a fantasy perspective, this stood out to me, and it has me a little bit worried. The run game and the Texans run defense. Texas run defense actually was one of the better rush defenses in the NFL last season. They only allowed around 96, 97 yards per game on the ground. But the Kim Kardashian, Nicki Minaj, Serena Williams size, Cardi B size, Megan, the Stallion size. But when they played the Colts, they allowed an average of 176 rushing yards in 2 games to the Colts. And that's not the most troubling part.
No, because Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson weren't there.
That is
during one of them, because I remember having Anthony Richardson against the Texans, and he was torching them for a quarter and a half.
Yes.
And then he got hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 100%. I couldn't agree more, man. It's a great spot for fantasy across the board. I think Anthony Richardson, side note, is like if you look at it by the numbers on a per snap basis, he is the most productive quarterback in the history of fantasy football. Now, it's a small sample size, but his rushing ability is just through the roof. So, I mean, I have Anthony Richardson in my best ball for the season long, more than half my leagues. He's a guy, just when you get running quarterbacks, it's a hack already. And then he's the best athlete we've ever seen play the position of the sport. So, like, you had those things with the Shane Steichen offense where, we saw a lot of drop-off last year in Philly. And what was the one thing that you took away from Philly was Shane Steichen. And Shane Steichen, no matter what, has been able to get production. Hell, he used Gardner Minshew, brought him over from Philly as his backup, and that team almost made the playoffs. They were playing up against Houston to try to get in at the end of last season. But at that point was whenever CJ Stroud and Nico Collins totally torched them. And that's sort of where I want to focus my stacks this weekend, is on that Houston passing game. Because last year, now, Gus Bradley's still there at Indy. He runs cover 3 and cover 1 67% of the time. And if you look at last year, Collins in these games against Indy, it ended up being 9 targets, 7 for 146 in a TD, then 9 targets, 9 receptions, 195 yards in a TD. You ended up having Tank Dell with them the first game. The second game, Tank Dell was out, but Tank Dell he led the team in targets against cover 3 more so than Collins, and you're talking way less games. So if we're talking potency, both of those guys now, Stephon Diggs does come over, and a lot of people are talking about Diggs. And, after doing more research in the past week for this matchup, I actually am higher on Diggs than I was in the offseason. In the offseason, I was really not getting to as much of the Houston passing game because you couldn't decide which one it's going to be. Yeah. The thing is it's going to be good. So if you target it more as a whole and you get into scenarios where, say, if you're on Underdog and doing the Battle Royale drafts and you're getting around the second round and Nico Collins hasn't been taken, he was going like around the second, third, you can easily then decide, well, I already had Hill leave, Tyree, I can't get CD, I can't get Jefferson. Those top tier receivers are gone, but you can get a guy and stack him with your quarterback. And then still know that on the back end, if you want to get really heavy into the matchup, add Adele or a Diggs as the last piece in, because, a great site to get data. They have a data suite where it has all the best coverage matchup, and it's geared more towards fantasy production against coverages is Fantasy Points Data. And they have, it's a funny metric they've created, but they call it their ass, and it's their ass men.
Yeah,
separation.
Yeah.
You look at the top 10 separation scores for all of wide receivers in the football last year. Tank Dell was number 2 in his win rate. He was at 27.8%. Yeah, Nico Collins was 4th in the league at 26.1%. And I was blown away to see Stephon Diggs at 24.1. He was top 10 in separation win rate last season. So you're talking out of all of the NFL, you have 3 of the top 10 in regards to win rate and separation on the Texans. And Diggs didn't put up the numbers last year with Buffalo, but Buffalo, they had a really big transition with their offense and came a lot more of a power run team late in the season. They weren't nearly throwing the ball the way you would have expected it to be. So you could see the production go down. You also had some other receivers and a guy like Kincaid come up. So Diggs' numbers, and I think people being a little bit down on him this year may be a little bit overblown. I'm one that fell for the bait and didn't have nearly as much, but the more I look into it and then realize, man, alongside these guys that get open so much, he's not going to have the attention brought to him nearly as much. So if him as your third receiver is who I view this almost as, like Tim or Tank Dell, you could view as their third receiver, that's as good of a receiving core as you're going to find in all of football. And whenever you go into if you're playing multiple lineups in the Battle Royale, don't worry if you aren't able to get one of those top guys, because I think stacking the Houston passing game or the Dallas passing game, if you're able to get Lamb, then you get Dak as like your last pick coming in. But if you aren't fortunate enough to get those guys, get Houston, load up on Collins and Stroud, and then if you want to really go in, add Dell.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's good stuff on that. I love that stat.
Metric, average separation score.
We're not getting class. It's average separation score. That's what they call it. But you're right about the Texans. That would say the Texans have the best trio of wide receivers in the league based on that separation score. It's kind of what you're throwing out there. Let me ask you, I know we're getting close to the end of it here. You got a big game coming up tonight. You got the Packers and the Eagles. Do people usually stay away from games that are overseas?
I don't know, man, that we haven't had many of these, but this ain't overseas. This is down over hemisphere. This is down
international games, I should say. The international.
Yes. Brazil, but that's one I don't know. It seems a little weird. I heard the Packers have like a 2-hour commute to the stadium or something like that.
1.5 to 2-hour commute in traffic.
I don't know what to think. I'm just treating it like a normal fantasy game. What are your thoughts on it?
I will say that I am intrigued by the Kellen Moore factor in this. Kellen Moore is the new OC for the Eagles. And remember, they made the trade for Jahan Dotson.
Yeah,
and it kind of went under the radar. But what people need to realize is that in Kellen Moore's offenses, I went back and did some research on it. His motion man is usually that whoever that motion man is, they are huge in terms of the target share. A lot of targets are funneled to that guy. CeeDee Lamb, when Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb led the NFL in 87 points per reception as the pre-snap motion man. And last season, Keenan Allen led the NFL in PPR as the pre-snap motion man. And that was also in Kellen Moore's offense. His previous high before that was in the 40s, and he was at 105. So Kellen Moore, we know he likes to funnel targets to whoever that motion man is. And a lot of people that believe that with Philly, Jahan Dotson is going to be outside and that A.J. Brown's going to be outside more, and Devontae Smith is going to be the slot guy, and he's going to be the motion man. Now, take it even further. When Devontae Smith had his Heisman Trophy winning campaign there at Alabama, Nick Saban's offense, but obviously Sark was the architect of it because he was the offensive play caller there. When Devontae Smith was in the slot, he had a Pro Football Focus record, actually, of yards per route run from
496.
It's crazy. Yeah, 4.96. That was his yards per route run from the slot. And the belief is that that's what Kellen Moore is trying to replicate. Put him in the slot more, move him around more, let him be your motion man, and try to replicate what Sark was doing as the architect of that Bama defense with Devontae Smith. Since Devontae Smith entered the NFL, he's run just 23% of his routes from the slot. But over that time span, 7th best in the NFL in yards per route run from the slot, 2.48. All of his other routes, I think he's at 1.66. So I think that's the plan. So in case you are thinking about, getting Devontae Smith in some of your daily lineup, might be a good idea early on, because I think teams may be a little bit shell-shocked by how Kellen Moore is going to utilize him in the slot. Also, Kellen Moore is going to bring the pace, and he's going to bring the pre-snap motion. They didn't use a lot of pre-snap motion in Philly. I don't know why. They were 30th. They were 30th in the NFL in pre-snap motion rate. But trust me, the Chargers were 5th, and Kellen Moore's history tells us they're going to be a top 5 to top 8 team in pre-snap motion rate and in pace, situation neutral pace. All those things will help the Philadelphia offense. But more importantly, I think Devontae Smith is the biggest winner of those offensive changes. So keep that in mind. More play action pass, probably more pre-snap motion, and they're probably going to have more pace, more up-tempo. All that's going to help out that offense, help out Jalen Hurts, but I think help out Devontae Smith too.
Yeah, you're spot on with Devonta Smith. He was one that really thinking more is going to benefit him the most. The Philly offense just got so stale by the end of last season. Yeah. And for this matchup also, another area to attack, if you're getting those stacks and say you weren't able to get A.J. Brown because they have the same type of primetime palooza thing that you mentioned, where you only have 4 teams drafting. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8 comes back around. Yeah. You can probably get Devonta Smith if you don't get A.J. Brown, but a good one to correlate it back with if you get Hurts is Goddard, because Dallas Goddard over the middle of the field. You look at Green Bay, where have they been attacked? They give up like the most yardage over the middle of the field over the last 3 years. They've been just horrible. They've given up tons of production to tight ends too. So, yeah, I remember Jake Ferguson put up a lot in that playoff game. A lot of it was garbage, but across the middle, he was wide open all the time. But that wasn't just a one-game thing. That's a trend that's sticky against Green Bay. So, in addition to Devonta Smith, you can get a lot of the passing game with Philly by putting him with Goddard. And all you got to do is if those guys are the ones getting the focus, you're going to trampoline over all those A.J. Brown teams with players that were picked lower. And in that primetime palooza, it's attached to the Lions and attached to the Rams game. And Rams, tight end situation isn't great. Parkinson could be good, but Laporta's going to go high. So if you can't get Laporta, who could be like the number one, probably is the number one tight end for fantasy this season going into it, don't be worried that you can still get a really good tight end for those primetime palooza ones in Dallas Goedert and get him, 4th, 5th round, all the way even at the very end of your drafts for that last spot.
That's good stuff, Matt. And one quick little nugget so we're talking about the Packers and Eagles. Scheme-wise, Packers are changing their defense. Remember, they hired a new defensive coordinator, new DC, Jeff Hafley, who was at Boston College. So they played mostly single high coverage. They were top 5 in the NFL at single high rate last season. They may change some things up. If they don't, and they're still heavy single high, A.J. Brown, 45% boost in first read target share when he's going up against single high coverages, 85% boost in fantasy points per route run in that situation as well. So A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith could have big games tonight, depending on what the Packers present to them. All right, Matt, thank you very much for the time, brother. Man, I cannot tell you how grateful I am to have you a part of the On Texas Football family, man. You're killing it. Let me tell you about our sponsor one more time. Our friends over at Underdog Fantasy are really grateful for them for being a part of the On Texas Football family and sponsoring our Underdog Fantasy Football show. Get in the game, ladies and gentlemen. Football season is finally here. Underdog Fantasy is the best place to play fantasy sports. It works really easy and really simple. All you got to do is download the Underdog app, go online. Takes almost no time. You can play their pick'em game where you can make your picks. It takes 60 to 90 seconds if you have no time like me, because I got a 11-month-old in the house. Or if you got some extra time, go down the rabbit hole like my man Matt Butler, get all the data that you need, and you can make up to 8 picks in a single entry, win up to 325 times your money. Underdog adds a ton of excitement to this sports viewing experience, especially for football, which is why I personally love it, and so does my man Matt. And the best part is you can watch your progress update in real time, ladies and gentlemen, and you're getting a great deal from Underdog. Right now, go to underdogfantasy.com or download that Underdog app, and you can use the promo code on Texas right now for a first deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash plus a free pick. That's right, folks. They're already hooking you up at Underdog before you even start to play fantasy. They're already going to give you a great deal. Once again, use the code on Texas right now for a first deposit offer up to $1,000, and you'll get that free pick from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. That's Underdog Fantasy, our choice and the choice for daily fantasy. All right, Matt. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, man.
Can't wait to talk to you next week. Enjoy the weekend, by the way. And we'll talk to all you guys as well. Thank you, Matthew, behind the scenes. Thank you to our good friends at Underdog Fantasy. And thank you guys for watching and listening. Remember, Matt Butler in Austin. You can hit him up via Twitter if you have actual fantasy questions that you want to pick his brain with. He's very he's very social on social media. All right.
I'll get out there.
Hit him up. All right. any questions that you have, and you get me up too. I'm at Rod Babers in the Twitterverse. It's not up there for you, but you can hit me up. You can hit us up too. We want to make the show as interactive as we can, so we'll try our best to try to address your questions and comments. All you got to do is present them to us. All right, thanks again, Matt. I appreciate that. Thanks to Matthew behind the scenes, our producer, and thank you, guys. Until next time, hook 'em horns.